Everybody knows FDR's record in solving the Great Depression, or at least ameliorating it, and winning World War II. But very few people know much about his record before he got polio in 1922. And it's a fascinating story. Roosevelt was first elected to the state Senate from his Hyde Park district, which was a Republican district, but he campaigned personally in his magnetism, his charm, touring the district in his red Maxwell car, capable of doing up to 20 miles an hour, meeting voters and shaking hands. And he was successful in winning that Senate seat. When he was in the state Senate, he was consciously modeling himself after Theodore Roosevelt, his fifth cousin, namesake, and the uncle of his wife, Eleanor. And Theodore Roosevelt had led an effort in Albany against Tammany, and FDR stepped right into those shoes and led an effort to thwart the Tammany nominee for U.S. Senate and to push a reform candidate. Eventually he had to compromise, but he made quite a name for himself as a reformist leader. And of course everybody paid attention to him because his name was Roosevelt. He then entered the Wilson cabinet as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, the same job Theodore had had. And that was deliberate on his part, to follow in Theodore Roosevelt's footsteps. In the meantime, in 1914, the Constitution changed to permit the direct election of United States senators. Until then, they were elected by the state legislature. And in the very first primary for senator, done by a statewide vote, FDR ran for the Senate. He lost about 3-1. But very few people understand that in 1914 he was a statewide candidate in New York State. His service as Assistant Secretary of the Navy was widely celebrated, probably because of the Roosevelt name. And in 1920 he was the candidate of the Democratic Party for vice president. James Cox was the presidential nominee, and FDR was the vice presidential candidate. Cox and, of course, Roosevelt lost badly to the ticket of Harding and Coolidge. But FDR was absolutely on his way and probably would have been the Democratic candidate for president in 1924. But then polio struck in 1921 and 22 and knocked him out. And it wasn't until 1928 that he was able to get back on his feet politically, although never literally.